Looking for something new in sci-fi or fantasy? Check out what Brandon Sanderson, Orson Scott Card, Nnedi Okorafor, and others chose as the best new stories of the year in the L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future anthology from 24 award-winning authors and illustrators, plus art and writing tips and bonus stories. L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future. Buy your copy at galaxypress.com, Amazon, or wherever books are sold.
All right, everybody. It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. The Outer Realm in the category of Best Female Hosted Podcast. The Outer Realm is a very popular show hosted by Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, which boasts millions of listeners each week who are well known for and have been complimented on their very laid-back, roundtable style of interviewing. Together, this dynamic duo brings you the best of the best with guests from around the world who are well-versed within their respective fields of ufology, paranormal, esoteric, and other areas of high strangeness, and more. So go to podcastawards.com to nominate The Outer Realm in the category Best Female Hosted Podcast. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and do it now.
All right, everybody, it's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcast. Yes, it is that time of year again. There's a show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. UFO Undercover in the category of entertainment. UFO Undercover brings you some of the most revealing and current research that is being done with respect to alien abductions and contact. Host Joe Montaldo has been an abduction researcher for over 35 years and is uniquely qualified to bring you live interviews with some of the most well-known researchers in ufology. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate UFO Undercover in the category of entertainment. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and get out and vote now.
You are listening to UPRN, United Public Radio Network, coming to you live on 105.3 right up to 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. UPRNtalkradio.com.
Allens Investigate, airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans. Yay, and welcome to the Allens Investigate with me, Shona Allen.
And I'm Gary Allen, the Cockney Bard.
We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans, and also on Roku. Now, this week, we'd like to welcome very special guest, Debbie Elliott, writer, researcher, podcaster, and writer-editor of Hermes Risen, online Esoteric magazine, featuring articles and book reviews and interviews from a collection of inspiring authors. A proponent for truth-seeking and bringing forth the ancient wisdom, Debbie gives workshops on esoteric paths such as Books of Thoth, as well as podcasts on her YouTube channel. Welcome, Debbie.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi, guys. It's really nice to see you both.
And you as
nice
well.
To see you.
We meet at last.
I've been watching your shows recently. You've done some crackers in the last few weeks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very kind. Well, I thought that we would start the show off by asking you a bit about yourself, really.
Okay, yeah. I've always been interested in theology and faith and religion since I was a little child. I was one of those weird children that asked my parents if I could go to church, and they thought I was very odd. They let me go to Sunday school, but not church. And, this was back in the early 70s. And there wasn't many other faiths around then, so I didn't really know about other religious faiths and things. But I loved going to Sunday school. I really enjoyed it. I loved getting my little books and being given, you remember the little ladybird books that we used to,
yes.
I don't know if you guys got them, but we used to get them when we were kids. And they had ladybird books on, the story of the apostles or on Jesus or Old Testament books. And so that got me, I always had a faith and a belief in a divine source of some kind, but it wasn't until I was in my teens and I started studying religious education at school that I realised there's a whole world out there of different
Indeed.
faiths, religions.
Yeah, that takes me back, Debbie, to religious education. We had that in our school. And the only thing I can remember about it was writing a piece on Confucius. So that was quite a start for me. But that touched upon me, yeah.
He's very deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so was that as a teenager?
Yeah, that was I think I was probably about 12 or 13 at that point. Yeah. So you know, I didn't really understand it, but I wrote it in.
But do you not feel maybe because you was made to write that, but at the same time that was probably going into
that was
the
that was like a seed planted, I suppose, for many years. Oh, I still remember it, don't it? And you've just reminded me of that, so thank you. Yeah.
I did study Buddhism for a while, and so Confucius came into that quite a bit. But I saw that a lot of his was more like I'd call it common sense, obviously, to help people live in a better, harmonious way. Because we live in a chaotic world, and I think growing up, I realised that the world was very chaotic, and I saw that a lot of people, like your peers and your teachers, and even your own family, they all tell little fibs to children and. I was thinking, oh, you know, God's talking about we need truth and love and light, but nobody's doing it.
No. Well, we could do with the Lady Bird Book of Common Sense. That would be rather good, wouldn't it?
Certainly would, yeah.
They were fantastic books for us children, and I don't know if there's books like that for kids today. I did do a little show on my channel recently. I think it's a shame that the Mr. Men aren't being given to everybody at school, because that was another great way of teaching children not just manners, but just how people are different, aren't they? I was growing up, my mother said everyone's the same, and I realised pretty quickly, no, we're not all the same, are we? We're all quite different, and I think that causes confusion amongst people.
Exactly, and I think it's quite horrendous, really. How schooling has changed, you know, from when we were kids and everything, and you would, you know, go out the garden for your entertainment, basically, or kick a football in the street. Now, you know, with the podcast, sorry, not the podcast. Now with the podcast,
Freudian
I don't think they, Freudian slip. I don't think they got podcasts, have they? You know, when they got their iPads and that's what I meant, the iPads and everything, you know, and kids and. You know, and some of the books I've seen, what they're trying to educate kids with is absolutely abysmal. So not a big fan of, you know, what's going on at the moment, I'm afraid. Yeah.
But you're right, though, because I think that, you know, society tries to squash people into a box. They try to pigeonhole people. And people are far from that. People are so diverse views and understandings of life. And we have to look at that as the many facets of the source, don't we?
Yes, and that everybody's an individual instead, like exactly as you said, they want to put everyone in a box, make you repeat everything, become like robots. And I think this is why when I was a teenager, I was a bit of a rebel at school. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I started going to evening class and beginning to enjoy education, because then it was more of a, well, it was obviously things I wanted to learn, like philosophy or religion, or you know, I didn't go to university till I was in my 30s. And I got, went and did a degree in divinity in Wales at a theology college, and I loved it. Where at school I found it hard work.
Well, it was boring. Wasn't it? Let's be honest, it was boring. And the fact the fact they want to give you, you know, things that you never need to know in the rest of your life, but it's drummed into you. And I think the word is conformism. We're looking. I don't like conformism, Debbie. No.
Well, that's why I think we need an overhaul of the whole education section. Really, absolutely. I've been going to Rudolf Steiner House, who was the founder of anthroposophy, and then I discovered there are Waldorf schools, which are all based on not necessarily his work, but they work with the children and see them as an individual. So if they see a child's quite arty, they'll encourage that. You know, at the same time, try and encourage them to do other things, but they work with the child, not with a whole class. You're all going to learn this, and nothing's going to, you know, we're not looking at you individually. So when I looked into what these Waldorf schools were doing, I saw that I also know other people that do other kinds of teachings like that as well. They try to make sure that the child comes out, who that child is, who that child's going to become, and help them develop themselves and be the person they want to be, which doesn't really happen at the schools we go to.
No, unfortunately not. And I think quite often as well, and I don't necessarily blame the teachers for this, because they have to work with, the resources they have, and often, they're oversubscribed in the classes as well. So that must be very difficult. However, children with special needs. I mean, I remember going back when I was a child, we would actually have a peripatetic teacher, a special needs teacher, that would actually take these children and, give them time individually. I don't really see that happening so much now. And of course, these children who do have special needs are forced to fit in to, the mainstream kind of classroom, and it's really difficult for them. And of course, that's when they start being difficult and being naughty, if you want to call it that, because they can't adapt to that.
Well, there does seem to be an enormous rise in autism, doesn't there, at the moment? I mean, you can't go shopping without seeing a child with autism, or a disruptive child, whatever, in the aisles of Tesco or wherever. And I can't remember, Debbie, ever seeing too much of that when I was growing up. I've got to be honest. You had the odd pupil at school who were very disruptive, but
my mother would go mad if I played up in a supermarket. So you just was sort of on your best behaviour, wasn't you? But I find, and I do agree with you about the schools, there are fantastic teachers out there that are trying to do their best with the curriculum and such like. But I also find I've worked with children in the last few years. My job ended last year actually, but I was working with children in a play area in the summer in a splash park, which was great fun. But the parents would spend most of the time just playing on their phones and things. And I think a lot of parents are still children themselves. And they forget that they're, in charge of their little children. They should be being the adults. It's a peculiar thing. It is something that Gurdjieff talks about, who's someone I study over many years. And he talks about how people in their sort of early 20s, they can either go on to grow to become an adult, or they become stunted. And it's all down to how their conscience is, and or whether they get stuck in the material world and the secular world and not have any kind of spiritual or soulful encouragement, because that helps you develop yourself into I'm not saying a better human being, but you're more understanding of other people and more rounded individual. Yes. And this isn't happening today in the masses. I'm sort of being kind of pausing across the people that don't have a spiritual or soulful link to anything. They are just staying in a material secular world and not connecting with everybody else that's around them, or connecting with the land, or connecting with their children. They might be, I call them like the EastEnders people, that TV program, the soaps.
Oh yeah.
It's just living day by day with their dreams, and just living in a sort of what I call kind of unconscious way, though they think they are conscious, they think they are awake, don't they? But really they're just asleep and becoming mechanical and robotic and just following along with what they're being told what to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that you see the development of science over the years and everything, and culture is very much been focused on purely the materialism. They kind of missed out all the spiritual aspects of things, haven't they?
Yes, because we're in this rational world for thinking at the moment. The age of enlightenment kind of was good in some ways, but in other ways it did this rationality that's being put across by everyone and the people in charge, and poo-pooing people that are spiritual, and poo-pooing that there's a God out there, silly people, there's
a lot of poo-pooing going on, isn't there?
Yes, there's a lot of poo-pooing going on. And it's like they don't want people to be spiritual. And this is where I kind of come in from a bit of a way. Is this the dark forces trying to take us away from God or the divine source?
Yeah, you've got to believe, like someone said to me about that. They said, well, you believe in God, but you say you're not religious. And I said, well, I believe in God because God is in everything and all around us. And I mean, you know, it's a sublime intelligence that runs throughout nature, isn't it? I mean, it's obvious. I mean, and anyone who says there's no such thing as a God, if you want to, you can call him what you like, but I think God's a good a name as any, don't you, really?
Yeah, I tend to use the word divine source these days because I got told off once. I gave a big talk all about gods and goddesses, actually. But
Right.
throughout the talk, I used the word gods. And I could see this woman at the front couldn't wait to put her hand up. And she put her hand straight up and went, "Where's the goddess?" And I was like, I should have said, when I meant the word God, I meant God and goddesses.
Yeah.
Just all
I think the divine
encompassing,
source. Sorry.
all encompassing.
Yes, that's what I should have said. But I feel there's a divine source that's above all the other gods and goddesses. I do believe in other gods, and like, you know, we was talking about Thoth and the Egyptian gods or the Indian gods. I think they are gods, but above all that is a divine source that has given us free will, so it doesn't really interfere, but this divine source, he, she, or it, whatever, sends down other gods, goddesses, angels, or the hierarchy of archangels to help and work with us if we're open to it.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And I think the thing is that from my understanding, from what I've learned about these different kind of religions over the years, is all these gods and goddesses are basically a way of the ancient people to explain forces. For example, Mat, although she wasn't strictly a goddess, but Mat was a way of explaining the universal order of things and truth, which I sort of put to God, really, the truth. So, I mean, that was just their way of explaining, because I think it can be so complex and complicated for the average person that if they see objects, visual representations of things, they can accept it more readily than if you're talking about something that's an invisible force. They're like, oh, I don't really understand that, so I'm not going to believe it. So to me, all these...
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so to me, all these representations of gods and goddesses are simply to, be a way to explain it to the masses, really.
Yes, to help them connect with them. They're like aspects of all the divine aspects. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that, because that was one of the things that concerned me with, was it Protestantism? Protestants, they wanted to get rid of all the idols and the glass windows and things, but I think that's something for people to, like you say, connect with. It's something to remind you of who the gods and the goddesses, or the, you know, in Christianity, the various apostles or the angels or Mary. It's a reminder to you, something you can help you visualize and make your connection.
Something tangible.
Yeah.
But the problem is, I think, is they have to, people have to go through somebody on earth to get to God, or to get to that sublime intelligence. But when they learn and realize that you don't need that, you are it. So, but that's a part of the journey, isn't it, Debbie?
Yeah, you need to connect, learn about other things to help you get to the divine source. Though I think for me as a child, I always believed in a God and a faith, but I didn't understand about free will then, and that God doesn't really interfere, him, her, himself. But it was something that helped me of, right, I can pray to Mary, or I could pray to Christ. Or as I became a teenager and learned about the other religions, I became very enamored with the Egyptian gods straight away as soon as I saw them, and felt quite a connection with them, really. I do believe that in past lives, and that we've been here again and again and again. So I wonder if I was perhaps in the Egyptian age, because I felt such an affinity with them. And I spent a lot of time at the British Museum looking at the gods and the statues there. And when I went to Egypt, I was very lucky. I got to go with John Anthony West. Do you know who I mean?
Yes, I do, yes.
I went with him in 1997. And as soon as I got there, I just was like, I spent most of the 2 weeks going, wow, 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 and feeling just blown away. But he really helped me understand my connection to the old Egyptian faith, because he looks at it in a more esoteric way and explained to me. He was the one that introduced me to Gurdjieff, actually. And then I was just on a roll with Gurdjieff. But before that, for many years, I was studying Theosophy. That's in my late teens, I discovered Theosophy and Madam Blavatsky. So that helped me realize that there's a deeper way of looking into faith and a deeper way to do your connection to the divine, not just go to church on a Sunday and sing your hymns and say your prayers. It was like teaching me what a mystic is, or how to myself connect. I don't need a church. And Gary was saying earlier about religion. I don't like that word either, because it's got too many connotations, but sometimes it's hard to explain to people. Religion doesn't mean going and joining a church or a temple or a synagogue or something. It's your religious path is what's important. There's too many connotations these days.
Yeah, repeat after me. We're all individuals.
Just like everybody else.
There was some quite interesting truths in that film, wasn't there, Life of Brian?
I think it's one of the best theological films ever. When people ask me, where should I start with religion? Have you got a good film? I always say that one, because
one of my favourites.
Yes. And they all went and studied religion, all the Monty Python writers, and studied philosophy, and they could see the confusion that religions cause, and how everybody's waiting for a Messiah, but when a Messiah comes along, not everybody believes him or her, and then others just fall into that persona and character, and many people get misled. There's so many false messiahs out there.
Well, it's true, and I think he does say on there, he said, you don't need anybody, doesn't he? He makes that point on there.
He's not the Messiah. He's a very
naughty boy. Brian.
Because I say that to a lot of people as well. You don't need anybody, but I do see people want to have a bit of guidance. So I don't mind helping people find their soul and find their path to God. But then, off you go. You do it yourselves. And this is something Gurdjieff said, and Krishnamurti. He said that, well, he was supposed to become the new Messiah for Theosophy. Krishnamurti, he was picked up by Annie Besant and Ledbetter, and they were going to make him take in the energy of the Christ and the energy of Buddha, and he worked on it for many years, and then he came to the realization of, I call it the Brian moment. He suddenly realized, I don't want to be a Messiah. You can all do it yourselves.
Exactly.
So I don't know if the Monty Python got the idea from him or not.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But there were some really quite interesting things, not just with the Life of Brian, but also the Holy Grail was another one. They made some quite interesting points and symbolism in it. And for instance, King Arthur, which I believe was played by Graham Chapman, on his tabard, he's got a big blazing sun on there. So he's telling you that King Arthur is the sun symbol. You've got the 12 knights of the round table. Well, the round table is the zodiac with the 12 zodiac signs on them. Then we go to the clock face. We have 12 numbers assigned, or 12 hours of half the day, and 12 for the other half of the day. You've got the 12 labors of Hercules, haven't you? You see, all of these things are all interconnected.
Oh, they are, yeah.
Absolutely. And you're so right about the sun symbol, because I think a lot of this is about the sun is the representative of the divine force. We have all the sun kings. Arthur was a sun king. I'm actually just been reading the prophecies of Merlin. I only finished it the other day. And what he was, the deeper looks of what Merlin was trying to teach Arthur. And Arthur was aware, because I believe there was an Arthur, and that he was this sun king that was trying to bring back I call it the Christ impulse, or the sun impulse, or the sun king impulse of, we are all solar beings. And I know many people like to dabble with the moon. I myself used to dabble with the moon, but I see that's kind of looking at your darker side, your shadow side. But really, we want to become the sun. And in this Merlin book, he was talking about how once we've understood who we are, so like you were saying about the astrology, so we've got 12 signs in us, all at different degrees. Once we can figure out who we are and then let that go, then the sun shines through us and we become the sun, the essence that we should be. And that just blew me away. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I've been trying to explain to people for so long, but I didn't have the words for it. And I think the Arthur stories are a continuing of the ancient wisdom and of the myths of how we can transform ourselves. It's an alchemical transformation. I'm sure that's why we're all here on this planet.
I think so, definitely. And I think also you could also apply that to Christianity as well, because I know there's a lot of people that will absolutely, interpret the Bible word for word, but underneath, from my understanding and my learnings, that there's deeper symbolism within the Bible.
Absolutely.
And it truly is about enlightenment and the soul's journey.
Yeah, written in allegories, I think.
Yes, well, I was being taught by various people, especially Gurdjieff, about how the Bible has an exoteric story for those that just, go to church and don't want to go too deeply into it, but try to understand the parables, still have their connection to God. But then there's a deeper one. It's like reading between the lines, which has all the esoteric symbolism of doing exactly what the Arthur myths were telling us, of how to develop ourselves and become the true person you're supposed to be, your mission on this earth, and how to get yourself back to the divine source, whether it's in this lifetime or whether it's possibly when you pass on, when you die, to have your soul developed enough to go back to the divine source. And I think if you don't develop your soul, you get caught up in the reincarnation cycle and come back round again. So we're constantly being given the chance to become the person we're supposed to be, the real essence.
I tell you what, I need a ruddy good rest after that many lives there. I've had enough now.
I know.
I need a holiday up there.
Well, Rudolf Steiner says we do get one. He says that we only reincarnate every 1,000 years, give or take a few years. I know many people, and Blavatsky says this as well, we come back after each life. We have a little rest in a place called Devacham, or is it Karmaloka?
I thought you were going to say Devonshire.
Devonshire, yeah.
Devonshire. Oh, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Go and stay in Devonshire for a while.
That's not so bad, is it?
I know.
I've been to Devon, it's lovely.
Could have chose Cornwall, I think.
Well,
And
Cornwall's
I've just been to Cornwall, which was just divine. I loved it. I actually went to my... So we're going to have a little holiday wherever it wants to be. In fact, they say that this little place is your paradise. You have a little rest there, and then you're brought back into the reincarnation cycle if you haven't developed yourself enough to go on to the next level.
Well, life is beautiful, isn't it? It's just some of the people in it. It's not so nice.
But they're learning, aren't they? They're on their soul's development.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because obviously the old name for the sun is soul, S-O-L, and we have a soul, S-O-U-L. So it's your sun, isn't it? So we all have a sun within us, a spiritual sun, if you like.
Yes, absolutely. And when we're born, it's just our essence when we're a little baby, which I think is when we're the sun, as a little baby. But then as we grow up, our personality develops around us and it starts to encase that soul, that sun. And I suppose it's how you develop, whether you become, not necessarily a bad person, but go down perhaps a negative path. Sadly, there's a lot of depressed people out there, a lot of angry people and such like. Or whether you can keep that faith in yourself and keep that sun shining, isn't it? I myself went through quite a dark period on and off over my teens and my 20s because I couldn't understand, you think, I believe in you, God, but I'm not getting what I want. And it took me a long time to realize God doesn't give us what we want. We're here to work on ourselves. It's not necessarily a material gain or get that, nice job. Yeah, what you need. It's all about developing your soul and how you are, what you bring out of yourself, what you say to people, how you act. And many people, they learn bad habits. They become mechanical in the way they are. They react to things all the time. And Gurdjieff talks about how we need to act instead of react. We need to be aware of how we're responding to people, be aware of what we're feeling inside, be aware of, are you bringing old impressions up because someone's done something to you? He does this example about a man gets up in the morning and his newspaper's not there. So he's got the ump straight away. And then he goes to brush his hair and he drops the brush. He's like, ugh. And then he picks the brush up and drops it again. Ugh. And then he goes off for a walk. And then a beautiful lady walks by, like you, Shona, and gives him a lovely smile. And it changes his attitude completely. So it's how we're affected by things is what makes people swap and change. But if he was remembering himself or conscious of what he was being like, he'd be like, well, why am I getting angry with the newspaper not being there? I dropped the brush. That was just me being careless. And then the second time I dropped it was because I was angry, you know. And it changes you when you're aware of how you're being, that you're feeling angry, that you're feeling annoyed. It stops in you. But people find it difficult to think like that at times.
It's a bit like when you stub your toe on the table leg and then you shout at the table and blame the table. The table's going, what? I've not done anything. I'm just sitting here.
Yeah.
As Gary was saying earlier, everything's got the divine in it. So that table's going, you know, like that's a God being as well. It's
difficult. It is difficult, Debbie, when you know, you are a spiritual being in essence, and you know that you've got a soul, but there's others who don't know you've got a soul, and you know, and then you get this war with your conscience of a fly, you know, landing on your eyebrow, and how irritated you can possibly be by that. You know, and it does challenge your whole being when you get a fly landing on you.
It's quite irritating.
Oh my God.
Unfortunately, we live near a farm, so we tend to get them sort of buzzing in, which is quite irritating actually. But
well, there was a report of one on the camera last week, I hear.
It's one of the joys of living in the countryside, isn't it?
I didn't see a fly on your camera last week, but I used to live in Wales, so I know what you mean. We had midges around all the time. But luckily by then I was learning you just got to send them a love vibration and then they don't sting you, but it can be difficult, and it's raising that vibration, isn't it?
I think I'd find it hard because having seen the midges in Scotland, they're horrendous, and I know my parents before I was born said that they went and had a holiday. They thought it would be lovely and romantic to take our tent and go camping on the Highlands in Scotland. And they said it was horrendous. They were bitten to pieces by the midges, and in the end they gave up and they got a hotel room instead.
I think it's happened to many people. But it is, because it's difficult to try and explain to people, we need to just send the love vibe, and then they're going, yes, but I'm being bitten all over, and you know, and it just irritates you. But is this something people, like children, should be being taught at a young age? I don't know. Most people again poo-poo it. Oh, we don't want to teach them things like that. We just need to teach them how to add and subtract. And
what do you think, Debbie, about you know, when the New Age movement came in? It was you know, quite extensive, wasn't it? You know, the New Age movement, as we say. And I found that with a lot of the flower power and people's idea of, you know, telling people what they'd been taught, that was the truth, and then propagating it and it going all over the place, and you're thinking, but you know, that's not quite the truth what you're saying, and you're spreading it about like the word of Jesus basically. And so there are people out there who are running around with ideas about they know exactly what's going on and what it is, when the real truth is we don't really know, do we? That's the problem.
We don't know anything, really.
We don't. No.
You know, we don't even know our humanity's origins.
How it came into being? Absolutely not. No.
But I do agree with you about the New Age. I got quite caught up in it in the late 80s and the 90s.
Yeah.
And after a while, I started to think this is all a bit fluffy. They don't look at the dark side. They don't look at your shadow. Some do, not all of them. You know, it's nice to say love and light to everything, but at the same time, we've got to learn how to do that and how to look at ourselves. And one of the most difficult things of any esoteric path when you're really working on it is that you have to look at yourself. They used to have on the temples of the ancient, on the doors of the ancient temples of mystery schools, know thyself. And knowing yourself doesn't just mean the love and light side. It also means the knowing of
dark side,
your dark side, and you know how easily you can be pushed or have your corns trod on, as Mr. Gurdjieff says, you know, and how easy it is to react to things. People don't want to look at their dark side, and I can understand why, because we've all been through torment, we've all been through trauma. Nobody's come through this life in, you know, happy-go-lucky and everything's worked out right for them. Everyone's at different degrees to be affected by something. It's learning how to deal with that and how to look at it and not be attached to it. It's coming back to Confucius and that kind of thing off. We shouldn't be attached to our desires. We shouldn't be attached to our emotions. We should be aware of them and aware of how we are and how we're feeling, or why, for example, that fly coming on your eyebrow, why is that annoying me, kind of thing. At the time, in the moment, it is quite difficult, isn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It does get a few expletives, I've got to be honest.
Well, the fly's probably having a great time, isn't it?
And then when you see two flies bonking on the thing and they're bonking on your computer screen and you're not really happy about it, I'll tell you.
No shame with them, is there? Get a room.
Oh, Lord.
Well, I have in here a little moth, and sometimes he makes an appearance and starts flying around, but I've never been able to capture him to release. So if a little moth,
you know what, Debbie?
He's obviously quite happy there. He's made
you know
his
what,
home.
Debbie? What amazes me, is that if you've ever seen a bug walking along, for example, and then it stops, and then you look at it and it plays dead, it's absolutely phenomenal, isn't it? That they have an intelligence to realise that they think you're going to harm them. They stop still. Spiders do it. All creatures do it. It's amazing, isn't it?
We have squirrels around here.
And I just can't understand people thinking that animals and creatures have no intelligence. I mean, it's phenomenal. But, when you're saying about the dark side of life, you just look at the fox and the rabbit, for example, when the fox rips the rabbit to pieces, and you think, how could you do that to such a beautiful creature as a rabbit? And then you look at the cat toying with the mouse and it's that side of nature, but you know that you can't have one side without the other. You just can't, can you?
No, that's it. And also, I think the animals have a different soul to us. Like we have a unique soul. They have a group soul. So all the cats share the same soul. That's why you see the birds flock together when they do that wonderful flying around, loads of them all, and none of them ever seem to hit each other, only now and then, but that's I think because they've got this group soul, so it's a slightly different soul to us. But obviously everything has to eat, doesn't it? The animals have to eat. Because I find it heartbreaking. I can't watch animal documentaries anymore of the lion going after the baby antler or the baby deer. It breaks my heart.
I couldn't watch it either. No,
it's difficult, if you're not I'm not a vegetarian, and it it is difficult, isn't it? Because I like to eat meat, but I love animals, and some people say, well, how can you love animals if you eat meat? But I don't know, it's a difficult one. Shona has the same problem with that, don't you?
I'm not a vegetarian either. I don't eat meat that often, but I do sometimes have cravings. But then the plants are alive as well, and I'm pretty sure they scream when we cut into them to eat.
You're quite right, because there was actually a scientist that did experiments on that, and he recorded when they pulled carrots out of the ground. They actually screamed. It made a noise. So, it's all part of life. And my granddad, as he once said, nature really, because he used to ponder things a lot. He said, nature really is just one giant restaurant, isn't it?
He's right. It is, yes. So it is difficult. I don't really want to eat animals, but I need the sustenance. Obviously, I need to eat the plants. I try to eat organically. I bless my food before I eat it and say a little prayer for, if I do go and have a chicken or have a steak now and then, I do say prayers for the animal, because I think prayers are very important, because you're still helping them with their soul development, and wherever they've gone up into their animal heavens or wherever, they need to receive our prayers, as do all our ancestors, and people also living need our prayers. We need to help them. And I don't think prayers are just being heard by the divine and ignored. I think that they're creating a kind of energy that can then pour down onto this planet, but there's...
You can see as well, Debbie, how much love plays a big role, doesn't it, in everything, with animals, the love that they give you, and you give animals in return, and love is the most beautiful thing, isn't it? And if you never find love, how you describe a love, then you've missed the essence of life. I think it's what love is, isn't it?
Well, there's so many types of love, isn't there? But the unconditional love is the divine love, which I think is the most important. But obviously, we also need the Philadelphia love, of brotherly love and sisterly love. And of course, we need the romantic love because we all like to fall in love, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And the agape love, the love that Christ brought for everyone, that we're all sons and daughters of God. You know, it's fantastic. And love does make the world go round, though most people would say it's money.
Yeah. You know, we struggle sometimes, though. You know, if you're going back to the religious aspect of it, and you know, and then people say, we met someone who was deeply religious, a lady, and you know, she was saying to me, you know, what do you think you know, this is, and what do you think that is? And when I explained to her, you know, she said, oh, you're going to hell. I thought, well, well, thanks for that.
What could you have been saying about that?
Well, you know, it's just
I think this
crazy idea.
The same lady was basically, you know, and each to their own, of course, but the same lady was saying that people that don't accept Jesus basically won't go to heaven. But then I said to her, well, what about the Muslims, the Hindus, the Buddhists?
Well, they're not going there. There's a whole lot of people, Debbie, not going there.
She didn't answer that one. She just went, well,
you're not going to heaven. That's it. You know, that's the end of it.
I had a lot of problems with that myself. And then I went and spoke to various people over the years. And for example, in the Hindu religions, Krishna is seen as the sun god. So they're still getting that same energy that the Christ is, but it's Krishna. In the Islam ones, I always get his name wrong, but he is mentioned, but he's the prophet. I can't remember the name now, but Muhammad's still teaching them the ways of what the archangels were telling them to do to get back to heaven. So they're still being blessed with the divine guidance. And in the African religions, or let's say the Egyptians, they're being given the ancient wisdom by Thoth, who many people say was in reincarnation. Jesus was Thoth in a previous incarnation. I'm a strong believer Jesus didn't become the Christ until he was baptized, and that was an energy that came down into him. He was just Jesus the man, but he must have been such a good man, you know, blessed man, that the Holy Spirit came down upon him and turned him into the Christ at that baptism by John the Baptist. You know, the divine source has been sending us messengers for centuries. And that was during the Piscean age, where we're coming to the end of the Piscean age now. We're going into the age of Aquarius. So the age of the teachers is ending, but we've still got all that teaching, and now we need to apply it ourselves. It's like when these people tell me, Jesus is coming back. No, he only does it once. I don't think he's going to be coming back, because that was the miracle of it all, that he came and did all this the once. But he's left us all the knowledge and the wisdom, obviously given us the knowledge first, and we have to turn it into wisdom. And so the same with Krishna, and the same with Zarathustra and the Zoroastrian, because he was a sun god or sun king. So the wisdom's all there for us to all learn from. And the age of Aquarius, from my own studies of it, is that we go and implement them teachings into ourselves and develop ourselves. It's now time for the individual to work. But I do find it, I meet a lot of Christians that, you know, say, oh, you know, I tell them my idea of Christ, and they're like, you're still going to hell because you're not following us. Well, that's how religious wars start. They're not.
Well, if you're right, Debbie, about there's not going to be another Messiah, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people.
He said, find God in you. Christ is saying, you take me in, not I, but Christ in me. So he's not coming back physically. He's coming back in our own hearts and our own souls. He wants to enter our hearts and souls, which is why they talk about, you know, we have to open up to, whether it's Christ, Krishna, whoever your sun god, sun king is, you open up to that deity so that they can come into you. I know it sounds a bit like possession or whatever, but they don't take you over completely. They just reside in you and help you develop your soul. I have Thoth behind me. I do the Egyptian Thoth workshops, and the emerald tablets of Thoth are all about that as well. He talks about that we can bring Thoth into our hearts so that we can learn the wisdom from Thoth, and he will guide us on to our next destination. But Thoth also talks about there's dark forces out there, as did Christ. Even Jesus before he was Christ. There's dark forces that want to stop us. You know, there's minions of the devil, Satan, whoever you want to call him, their mission is to stop us returning to the divine. And so they will do everything they can. And one of the big, I think, things that the dark forces have been doing is bringing in the age of rationality, so that we no longer stick to our connection to the divine, or make people feel stupid for it, or, you know, how silly of you. We're living in a rational world. So.
Well, it's a bit like the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz, isn't it? It's that she was always sort of trying to be diverted from the path somehow, wasn't she? And you had to stay on the yellow brick road, the golden path, you know, to get to the Emerald City, and green being, you know, immortality. So it's
interesting that you touched on Ledbetter, because you know, I opened the book of Ledbetter, and I opened it at the page of Hamza, the third great step of spiritual enlightenment, which is the swan. So I thought that was wonderful. Well, that was a wonderful discovery, that. And then it was just about finding the path to that journey to reach the swan. You know,
that comes up in the Merlin prophecies about the swans. The swan's another representative of the sun path, of going on the sun path. You know, it's amazing to see. In other countries, it's the peacock. I feel honoured whenever I see a swan swimming around. I'm like, yes, just a reminder. It's like them animals and birds are out there to remind us. And you was talking about a fox earlier, and I've been told in many different faiths, I see that the fox is seen as the trickster, but the fox is also to remind us to laugh at ourselves and laugh with other people, not laugh at other people. That's not nice. You know, we've got to keep light-hearted, which again is a sun thing to do. We have lots of foxes around here, so I'll give them a little wink and a nod and have a little smirk with them.
Lovely. I
think, Debbie, as well, when you're on this path, when you're on the right path, should we say, then what you're heading towards and becomes all important is truth.
Yeah, truth is the main thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, 100%. It defines your life. It builds your life. You know, build me a monument that was I can't remember it now.
Build me a monument that will stand forever.
That will stand forever, and I will tell you it was built on truth. That's right. Yeah.
And
so that truth that you find that you're being pulled all the way along the line to this great truth.
And truth is a higher vibration, and you can feel the difference, can't you? When you lie or fib, you can feel the
absolutely
bit off, can't you?
Not right,
and when you're doing this kind of work, you kind of start sensing when, you know, sadly other people lie at you or fib at you. I know it makes them a bit uncomfortable. It's very difficult to keep a lie going. But with truth, it is a much more harmonious, gentle, you feel centered when you're living in that truth. So I understand when people have a full-on faith and belief and in the truth of whatever it is they believe in, whichever faith, you can see the difference in them. It's like they shine, and this is what we're aiming to be, shine like the sun. But when we start getting caught up in the falsehoods, you know, like over the last few years, I don't know if you got caught up in it all, but definitely what was going on in the last few years, you could tell when things were lies and not right, or people that were accused.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
That's what Elvis said, didn't he, Shona? What did he say?
Oh, one of the famous lines was, he said, "Truth is like the sun. You can shut it out for a time, but it ain't going away."
That's brilliant. I didn't know he said that, because do you know he studied under Manly P. Hall?
Oh, right.
Did he really? I didn't know you've taught us something new.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Well, you know that there's someone called Bob Joyce in America, and it does appear to me, anyway, that he has an awful lot of mannerisms of Elvis, and and some say he is Elvis, and I wouldn't be at all surprised, to be honest. I've heard him sing, and he sounds just like Elvis.
Death?
Sorry?
Faked his death. Did Elvis fake his death?
Yeah.
I like that idea. He must have been under so much pressure.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And in his last few years, he was reading all kinds of spiritual books and doing various like studying kung fu and things like that, which all martial arts, which helps you. I know many people see it as a fighting force, but actually that was originally made just to help you work with your body, because it's not just about your soul development. You've got to develop your mind, your emotions, your body. All three need to be fit and balanced is a very important part of it. And he was working.
The thing is, if it's not him, then he has an amazing likeness to Presley. I got to say that. Amazing. He's a pastor, and Presley was deeply religious as well, wasn't he?
But it's interesting with Manly P. Hall, because Manly P. Hall was really an interesting man, wasn't he? Prolific. Yeah,
his Book of the Ages, was it called that? Anyway, that was a book by my bedside. That's it. Yes, I was dipping into that for years. I still do now and then, and I listen to him on YouTube. There's a lot of his audio up. So I listened to a lot of the audio over the years. But I know other people were also doing that kind of thing. He just was the one that became quite famous for it because he was working with the stars. And, it's finding people like that today. Thankfully, there are. Instead, we've got channels like yourself and other channels out there. And hopefully mine helps influence people to help people find who they are and find their path and not be put down by all the secularism of the world or feel put out by religious institutions, and instead find their own spiritual and soulful path. Because I think, one of my favorite swamis is Swami Vivekananda from the 1800s.
I've heard of him,
his my favorite quote of his is, "Find God, nothing else matters." You find God, you find peace and truth in your life.
No, it's very
peace,
true.
Truth and love, isn't it?
I think that Manly P. Hall, he did a lot as well for sort of getting people to look into symbolism as well. So that was quite an interesting one.
Do you study symbolism yourself, Shona? Do you like the tarot or anything like that?
Oh we've
I've got the A.E. Waite tarot, because I find I've had other tarot decks, and whilst I wouldn't call myself a tarot reader, but I do like using them on a personal basis. I think they're very enlightening. And of course, the symbolism of the tarot is a very interesting one, because you've got the 22 major arcana, which fits with the Torah and the 22 letters of light. And I think if people are sort of interested in that, then maybe they should go and do a bit of investigation with that, because that's quite interesting. You've got Rota, Torah, Rota being a wheel. So there's a lot of interesting symbolism, but I think the A.E. Waite is probably more of the original symbolism. I think there's some beautiful decks, don't get me wrong, but he's a bit more sort of traditional, I think.
Well, you know what, Debbie, we had I mean, I've said this before, but it was such an amazing thing. I shuffled the Rider-Waite pack 6 times in a row, and 6 times in a row I pulled out the magician card, witnessed by my wife Shona and her mum. I mean, so I mean, there's no question about it. If you're really tuned in with the cards and everything, boy, they can do some magic, can't they?
Yes, if you'd been doing that with me, I'd be like, right, you take that card and you go home and you look at it for a good few hours, like not necessarily, meditation, and just stare at it and see if the symbolism's coming into you.
It was astonishing. It was astonishing to see. It was like getting the lottery, only didn't make you rich. In understanding, to think that could actually happen. I mean, the odds of that were phenomenal, aren't it? It's phenomenal to get 6 times after shuffling 78 cards in a pack, and to shuffle it 6 times and get the magician card 6 times in a row. Phenomenal, wasn't it? That
it was. I think, but going back to Manly P. Hall, I think one of my favourite quotations of his, which I'll read you: "When the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. They shall then know the truth And more than that, they shall realize that from the beginning, truth has been in the world unrecognized, save by a small but gradually increasing number appointed by the Lords of the Dawn as ministers to the needs of human creatures struggling to regain their consciousness of divinity.
Exactly.
It so beautifully, because he's talking about the ancient wisdom, and the symbols are there. Because people talk about the occult's hidden. The occult isn't hidden. It's just for those that can be bothered to understand the symbolism.
Exactly.
Can be bothered to seek it, isn't it?
Yes.
Am I bothered?
Am I bothered? I think it's difficult, when you get these people, because it's the lack of understanding about what the occult is. You're often reading it on, if I go on Telegram and that, and there people there are going quite mad about people who study the occult and everything, but it's the lack of understanding what they're talking about. You're talking about, things that are hidden, that you can find some are hidden in plain sight, but it has nothing to do with dark satanic forces, unless, of course, you want it to be.
Well, I know, and I think the thing is this is fear is caused by ignorance, and therefore, if you go in search of the truth, it will dispel the fear because it will dispel ignorance.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and also I think people tarnish occultism with Satanism, and it's something I must admit I do try and work against. I've known of satanic groups over the time, but all we can do, because we don't want to go and get involved with them, but we can send prayers for them, or I normally do an awakening to conscience. I try and send them vibrations out, wake up to what you're doing and be aware that, find your conscience, because that's one of the most important things is your conscience. I think that's your connection to God, is your conscience speaking to you. Many people ignore their conscience, but
it's reminding me of Jimmy, was it Jiminy Cricket on Pinocchio, and he said, "Let your conscience be your guide."
Always let your conscience be your guide. Yeah.
Oh, I do remember. I remember Pinocchio from when I was a kid, but I haven't watched it for a long time. Oh, good old Jiminy Cricket. See, some insects have some wisdom in them.
Exactly.
I mean, wouldn't it be good, Debbie, though, if everyone who lied, their nose started growing? It'd be fantastic, wouldn't it?
It'd be a lot easier, wouldn't it? Imagine
then
all the politicians out there. Goodness me.
That's why we do this kind of work, because we need to be able to differentiate when people are lying, and we can even once you start working on this, you can even tell when the politicians are lying on TV. You don't even have to be in their presence. But that is one of the important things of the last few years, where they were trying to keep us all apart. They didn't want us sharing vibrations. And being with people is so important, because we are pack animals. But one of the things that the Steiner House schools do, if they have a bit of perhaps they did have a rebellious child, they would put that child sitting or her between two really good children to try and get them vibrations to work off into the good child. So we can all affect each other. Many humans are mimics, this again being robotic, and they see how one person acts and they copy them. If we had enough good people out there doing good acts, people will hopefully start copying them. But then when you get let's say a group of people that are anti that person doing all these good acts and start being horrible or backstabbing or talking behind their back, then that creates that negative, horrible vibration. And people like to feel they're part of something. So that's why they so easily fall into these groups that just follow things that probably aren't right for them.
I think as well, Debbie, it's like one of the things that you learn along your path is, and it depends how advanced you get, you're able to sort the wheat from the chaff. When you first begin on the spiritual thing, you do find when you at the very beginning, if you're having psychic experiences or whatever you want to call it, you do tend to tell people, and some people would laugh at you, whatever. But the point of it is when you come a lot more advanced, you realise that you're sorting out the wheat from the chaff, and that is the point of getting to that point where the swan is, and being able to decipher right from wrong, truth from lies, and good from bad. So you're refining your soul on that journey, aren't you?
Yeah, that's one of the important words, refining. I say that to
Refining.
people a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting rid of all the crap inside yourself. So I don't know if you can swear and say that. Sorry, but
Yeah, no, crap's a fine
We've
word.
heard
No,
far worse,
crap.
don't
Yeah,
worry.
you did a lot worse than that from me, I can tell you.
I live with a Cockney. I have to listen to that every day.
Do you know when people come from the East End, they've got this thing where every other word
It's the F word.
is the F
isn't it?
word.
The F bomb.
because you can't seem to say a sentence without an F in it.
And I used to be like that so much. And, you know, also when you're a teenager, it's quite cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then I had this kind of guru guy kind of explain to me, they say you're turning the air blue, don't they?
Yeah,
but he's
that's
saying
right,
this
yeah.
was explaining of how you're making bad vibrations into the air. And I'm like, oh no, all those swear words.
Yeah.
I said I've polluted the air.
I'm going to use that one. You're polluting my
You're
air.
polluting
Stop
it.
I'm going to use that one on you next time as well. I've just got to interject. So sorry. If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Allens Investigate. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans and also on Roku.
Yeah, with our very special guest, Debbie Elliott.
Indeed.
Oh, I feel so honoured to be on. I love your shows.
No,
Thank
you're
you.
fabulous.
No,
You're
we're
a fabulous guest, Debbie.
We're really
Fabulous.
pleased that you came on.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting, isn't it, how sort of all these kind of things interact. But thinking about Helena Blavatsky, I think she was a really, really pivotal character in the sort of understanding of getting the Eastern philosophies and things out to the West, wasn't she?
Yeah, she obviously I don't know if you know that she was talking to these masters, they call them, or Mahatmas, this white brotherhood who were like a group that was overseeing the world, but they don't really reveal themselves that often. And in fact, I've been reading recently that some of the original white brotherhood didn't want the two masters, because there was two of them, to go and speak to Blavatsky, but it was a time that was needed. And it wasn't just Blavatsky, you know, Rudolf Steiner turned up, and then we had Gurdjieff and later Roerich and many others. But with Blavatsky, she had this connection of being able to see what was coming and at the same time try and pass this on to other people. But she was I would love to have met her. She must have been such a character. You know, she was a concert pianist. She could read books. She understood the spiritual ways. She used to be a medium, but later she said, don't do this kind of thing. And I kind of agree with her. I think a lot of these mediums don't know what it is they're bringing through. And I think she learned after a while, was taught that it wasn't necessarily, you know, the people we've lost over time or the dead people, that it was possibly demonic forces pretending to be.
I think, and I think it's about discernment again.
Discernment,
though, isn't it?
yeah, it's so important. I mean, we always tell the story about, we went to this medium. There was a medium, he was on stage. It was a program being filmed, and basically he was saying to Shona, you know, he said, I'm getting Jim, and Shona said, yeah, I can take that, that's right. And then in the next breath, he said, he's dead, isn't he? And she said, oh, I've just been talking to him about 5 minutes ago. No, he's not dead.
No,
you know,
no,
but that is about really, you know, that's a typical thing what you're saying, Debbie. You know, if you've got to have discernment, you've got to be able to know what to tell people. And like, if you're giving people healing or whatever, you can't say, oh, you know, I'm going to cure you of your cancer or everything. Or, you know, you've got to have a little bit of, well, not only common sense, but also that discernment. You have to have that, you know.
It's very interesting with Blavatsky as well, because I didn't really know an awful lot about her years ago. And, you know, I just touched on bits and pieces, so I knew of her. And I knew her picture, obviously. But I saw her. She came to me twice. Both times, funny enough, when I was in the bath. I seem to have a lot of experiences in the bath, actually, or sitting on the loo is the other one.
Oh, on the loo, I don't know about that, but the bath, at least you're in the water and it's like the water elementals. But really? Oh, yeah.
And Doris Stokes as well. But the interesting thing with Madam Blavatsky is so that where we lived, we were sitting in a cafe one day, and there was only just one other couple in there, and they were an elderly couple. And we got talking to them, and as it turned out, they were Theosophists, and they were also members of a co-masonry group as well. And they invited us along to one of the meetings, the co-masonry meetings, and we thought, oh, well, we'll go along, you know, it's quite interesting. So we got to this place, and this was a quite an old building, and the big wooden door as we arrived, and it wasn't windy or anything like that. It wasn't an automatic door. It was just an old-fashioned door on an old chapel, basically. When we got up to the door, it just opened by itself, which
welcoming you in.
Yeah, so that was quite amazing.
Yeah.
In the end, we chose not to, because we felt that, you know, we'd rather just do our own thing. But, you know, it was a really interesting experience. So because of that, I kind of delved a little bit more into Madam Blavatsky. And interestingly, she was also inspired by Edward Bulwer-Lytton, who's famous for the pen is mightier than the sword. Now, he was a really interesting character as well. And funnily enough, where we used to live, there was a big manor house there. His father actually owned it. So another connection again.
Yes. But I find that in these kind of circles, we do seem to be all being kept together. It's like to remind us that you're carrying on the footsteps of Blavatsky and Bulwer-Lytton. You know, I love his books. I thought they were great, his fiction books. And then I can't remember which one of them is, but one of them he
Coming Race, was that
Blavatsky. Sorry?
The Coming Race is one of
that's one of my favourites. Yeah, all about the vril.
That's right. And also Zanoni, which was a Rosicrucian novel, wasn't it?
But I wonder if he was getting all this through the ancient knowledge and being told all this to put this out there, you know, so that people like ourselves, we can see more into it, where, you know, someone that's not into this will just read this book and think, oh, what a, you know, quite a thrilling little story. But we can see the inner depths of what that's telling.
You know, the funny thing is, Debbie, what people don't understand is people like William Blake, Rudyard Kipling, Agatha Christie, and many of the famous writers and everything, they all was fully aware and fully conscious of the essence that we're talking about, connecting to that essence that would inspire them in poetry, philosophy, you know. So, you know, I mean, some people may ridicule it, never, but they're reading the books of these people who were attuned in. You know, William Blake even believed he was talking to his brother. You know, his brother would give him messages. So
his brother showed him how to do, because Blake did a special kind of etching of how he did the etching, and it was his brother that told him how to do it from on high. And he saw his brother die, and when his brother died, he says he saw his soul lift out. I'm a big fan of William Blake. I love him. I do little puppet movies about. I haven't done one for a while, but I have some. They're put away. If I'd known, I'd have got them out, but they're packed away in their little box at the moment. But I love William Blake so much. So I've done these like puppet type Blake and his wife, and I then read what his poems or his words. I love his books, and then make films around them using them. And I've got all these little pictures, like little pint-sized pictures of all his art, and I try and make a studio of him in there. I just think he's just an amazing guy.
Amazing,
He's an amazing man, and I love Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, amazing.
Sorry,
you've got John Keats and Shelley and W.B. Yeats. There's a whole number of them, isn't there? And if you go back a little bit further, then you've got Dr. John Dee. You know, you've got what I always say to people, like the Sonnet 86 of Shakespeare, where he says, he nor that affable familiar ghost which nightly gulls him with intelligence. So if you understand what he's talking about there, you'll know that he's in touch with the source, not necessarily Shakespeare, because I think that was relating to George Chapman, but nevertheless, it gives you an idea of the connection to the source, doesn't it?
Well, I love Dr. Dee. He's another one I've done puppet films in the past with. And I find it interesting that he started off obviously all with good intentions and thought he was talking to the angels with Kelly. And then after a few years, they suddenly realized these aren't angels they're speaking to.
Well, you know the bit about Kelly's.
Kelly was a bit naughty as well,
Yeah.
wasn't he?
Like, can we swap wives? That was one of his one, wasn't it? The spirits have told me you got to lend me your wife for the night. Well,
and he went along with it.
But there again, there's the lesson in
That's the lesson.
discernment, isn't it?
discernment, yeah.
He wanted to believe so much that what he was doing was the right thing.
Yeah.
I love their stories of them going to Prague and trying to discover alchemy and things like that. Obviously, Kelly died out there. I often go actually to Mortlake not often. I try and go at least once or twice a year just to pay my respects to Dr. D, because I think without him, a lot of the magical works wouldn't have come out into the world. I'm concerned about how some people use the Enochian magic.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Myself, it can be used. It's like the Force in Star Wars, isn't it? It can be used either way, for good or bad. You can be a good Jedi or a bad Sith. But W.B. Yeats is another one of my favourites. I think he was one of the few that actually understood what magic is, as in connecting yourself with the divine, not going and making a love spell or making a spell to curse the person down the road, but to work with all the angels and the archangels. I'm a big fan of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And that's one of the most popular films on my channel. I did a puppet movie of that in collaboration with Atlantis Bookshop. And all about the story of the battle at Blythe Road between Aleister Crowley and W.B. Yeats and the rest of them, Moyna Mathers and Maud Gong and such like.
Wow. Are these films out on YouTube or anything, Debbie?
Yeah, they're all on my YouTube channel.
Okay. I shall go and watch those then.
I'll send you a link as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, please do.
So much fun to do, but to make that film, once I'd been asked to do it, I then went and asked Golden Dawn, sent a message out, is it okay that I make this film? And for the next few weeks, things just came my way. Books that I'd never been able to find came my way. Somebody managed to get some writings of, I can't remember which lady magician it was now, that I got to look at. Suddenly someone else had a wand that was from the original Golden Dawn and nobody knew who it was. So I got to look at that. And it helped me. Little things came along to help me put to the puppets. Because sometimes you've got to think, well, what were they wearing? And little things would just turn up to add to them. And the film just got made really well. And we used in it some of Crowley's book from the Book of the Law. And it was the actual chapter 7, which was all about how his house would burn down and an invisible new one would rise, because there's all this talk about if something burns down, it's rebuilt in the ether. So we launched this film, and I can't remember what year it was now, but we did it on the 1st of December, which was Crowley's death date. And 21 days later, after this film was premiered, Boleskine in Scotland burnt down. And we thought it was all, someone come up to us afterwards and said to us all, that was magic you did there. And I thought, there's me thinking I'm being the puppeteer, but maybe I had Crowley making me be his puppet to fulfill his magic.
He's probably having a good giggle up there, I should think, at that.
Yes. So,
my goodness. Well, the other one as well is Eliphas Levi, because he was a very interesting character, but I feel he's been rather maligned over time as well.
Yeah, because of Baphomet, I think, mainly. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what Baphomet is.
Yes.
So, to me, it was a representation of the male and the female energies coming together. Levi believed that the original gods were androgynous. I can never say it, but male and female, one being. And I think he was talking about that's what we are aiming to become in the future. I don't know if that's right or not, but I can see how many of us feel lost. Is it we're looking for our soulmate? Are we looking for the other half of ourselves? So maybe we were originally a male and female in one body.
Maybe what he meant by that is to become godlike, though, because God is neither male nor female. He is androgynous, so it's basically what he's saying is to become godlike.
Well, that's right. And there's a lot of things going on and saying, well, this is leading to transgenderism. This is a problem.
It's got nothing to do with that.
But it's nothing to do with that. It's just a male and female.
Well, it's all about duality and balance and harmony. That's what when I look at the symbol, what I read and interpret from that. And I think it's no coincidence that it was also sort of the Templars were accused of worshipping it. But of course, if we look at the symbolism, because obviously we're going back to the older Templars now, Knights Templars, I do believe that they had a great deal of esoteric wisdom and knowledge. And
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what they found in Jerusalem.
Yeah, and I think the thing is as well, I know Eliphas Levi also mentioned or applied Baphomet to the goat of Mendes, but Mendes was actually the Greek name of the Egyptian city of Jedet. And the chief deity was a ram deity called Bar-Neb Jedet, which basically means bar of the Lord of Dejet, which was Osiris, because it's to do with the Djed pillar. So basically it was a bar or soul of Osiris. So in that, I think really is the secret.
Yeah, and one of the things with that Djed pillar, we're supposed to be forming that in ourselves so that we stand upright. It's supposed to represent the spine. And if we've got it balanced and in tuned, we will connect with the divine.
Exactly. Because,
you pull up at the Djed pillar. It's meant to be down, and we're trying to pull it back up into ourselves.
We're raising it a little bit like in the Masonic initiations as well, when you're raised and they raise the Djed pillar, and then you've got the Nehushtan in the Bible where they raise that with the bronze serpent on. It's all basically the seed of the same, isn't it?
Yeah, and raising yourself up to the divine source.
Yeah.
But with Baphomet also, as you were saying, he's got the up and down hand. He's pointing up to the heavens and down
above,
to the earth.
so below. Yeah.
Yes. So, but I know many people are horrified by, like the phallic symbol on there and the horns. But this is all misinterpretations over the years of what these symbols mean.
Exactly. And actually Moses was also depicted with horns, wasn't he? So nothing, they're not meant to be anything evil or bad or anything else.
Well, this is the misunderstanding of Pan, isn't it? And the nature god, the god of all. And then you've got in Italy, when we went over to Italy, you've got the statue of, and it's called Faunus over there.
Faunus,
Faunus. So and people look at that and they think, oh God, that's the devil. But and that also links to Santa Claus as well. Where he got the red garb on now, but he used to have the green garb as representing the green man.
Yeah, it was Coca-Cola that gave it. I don't know if you're allowed to say that word on here, but that's what made them red, wasn't it? When they did their advertising, that popular drink. Yeah. But he was a green man, and he gave presents. St. Nicholas. He was trying to bring goodwill to everybody.
Yeah, goodwill to all men.
That's right, yes. And goodwill to all women.
Yes, of course.
Don't forget the women.
Well, I'm outnumbered, aren't I? 2 to 1 here, so I've got to be careful.
Exactly, yeah. You should be sitting in the middle, shouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we can balance you out.
But I think that, the Christmas thing is a really interesting one as well, isn't it, with the symbolism, because that's also to do with the Oak King and the Holly King again, isn't it? And about the sort of vying for, the sun's journey through the year and through the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So that's a really, really interesting story that you can apply to that time of year as well.
Yeah, because we're in the holly season now, because holly season, summer to winter, and then the new growth comes with the oak.
That's right.
But I like it with the lion and unicorn symbolism.
Yes.
We're now in the unicorn side of things, and then winter solstice, it would be the lion takes over, and you often used to see around our country the battle between the unicorn and the lion, and most people think the unicorn and the lion. The unicorn represents Scotland and the lion represents England, but really originally in the old mystic ways it was the representation of the seasons, and we're now going into obviously into winter, so that's why we're in the unicorn side, and the lion represents growth when he roars again from December the 21st. So exactly. I love it, and it's the same with the trees. And
of course the lion is also kind of synonymous with Jesus as well, as
the
a
solar
symbol.
king. Yeah, the solar king. Lion is there for sunrise and roars the sun up. Because I liked it in ancient Egypt, it was the baboon, because the baboon was always there, you know, sitting there with its little paws up, watching the sunrise. So that was given the symbol of being the solar king.
Yes. It's quite amazing, though, when you actually look over all these past symbols and things, you know, sometimes you even take for granted as well. You know, people just, they can't see it. It's completely overlooked, but it's right in your face.
Yeah, as you were saying earlier, just there for us, for all to see, for those that have got the ears and eyes to hear and see it. But many people don't want to be involved with that because they're too caught up in their own eyes, which is understandable if that's what they want, you know. But I feel that if they could find a little bit of a spiritual path inside themselves, they might find their life begins to get a bit easier in how they understand. I'm not saying easier in that everything's going to be all right, but in understanding why stuff happens to you, or how to not react, but act instead, and not react to things. So that's what I think these esoteric paths are all about, and what Blavatsky was also trying to bring the ancient wisdom back out, because there were no mystery schools anymore. So that's why she was given that mission to bring this out. But then I think a lot of her work was misused later on in life. Like, she was the founder of the New Age in a way. Without her, we probably wouldn't have the New Age. And she helped so many people, because Yeats himself, W.B. Yeats, used to go and speak to her and was part of her esoteric circle. So she knew there were people that wanted something deeper. So even in Theosophy, they had different branches. There were those that just had an interest. Nothing, didn't want anything more. But then there were those like Yeats that wanted the answers and wanted to get to the crux of it all and understand everything.
That's right. And you run the online magazine Hermes Risen, don't you? So could you tell us a bit about that? Because I'm sure there'll be listeners that would love to log on and have a look at that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we have Hermes Risen. It's quite a few different writers, actually. It's no money in it. We're all just doing it for free. You know, we've got one of those free websites. But what we do is we try to put out esoteric teachings, or we do a lot of book reviews of people that are bringing books out on any kind of esoterica, really. So we have anthroposophists, we've got theosophists, we've got Gurdjieff people, we have people from the pagan side of things, like the bit more Wiccan-y kind of stuff, and we have some guys that discuss poetry and look at how esoteric poetry can have meaning if you look deeper into it. And we've done interviews with various people. Last week I spoke to the Reverend David Parry. He's running a conference later this year on the Nephilim. And I think this weekend we've got Wayne. Actually, no, I think we've got Danny's done a piece on Lenora Carrington, one of my favourite esoteric artists, who was a British lady who went to live in Mexico, but she was part of the Surrealists. But as she developed and went off on her own, you can see into her artwork all the symbolism. She studied Theosophy. She studied with the Ouspensky people, actually, who were a break-off from Gurdjieff, and worked on herself and went and did sacred dances and things like that. So we have various writers that I wouldn't say necessarily decipher. We try to decipher, but at the same time, we want to put across what the artist is explaining. Though Lenora Carrington said decipher for yourself. So
because Frank L. Boone was a theosophist, wasn't he? The one who wrote The Wizard of Oz.
He was, and that is such a magical book. It is
magical.
Teaching people how to follow their heart, their soul, their courage, and like Shona was saying, of them finding that naughty wizard. But that was, many people do go down the wrong path, and hopefully they will pull themselves back up. There's so many potholes to go down, so many false gurus, which is why you have to kind of be aware of what it is you're getting yourself into, and go in with, as we were saying earlier, truth and an open heart, but don't fall for anyone, and don't become anybody's student for the rest of your life. That would not be a good guru.
Exactly.
That's the problem, isn't it? People do get hooked into certain ways of thinking by people who suddenly, I mean, like there's some of the gurus, you know, like got 6 Rolls Royces, and he's got loads of followers, and you know, and there's people online who have got podcasts and all that, and they're supposed to be perpetuating the truth and getting it out there, but you know, they're shills really, and they're saying half truths and they've got loads of, you know, millions of followers, and you think, oh my God, I hope these people wake up and smell the coffee at some point, you know.
Something I was quite concerned about, especially over the last few years, excuse me, but that yes, because obviously a lot of people were looking for someone to guide them, and I do hope these people do, like you say, wake up or suddenly smell, okay, this person's not quite right, there's something a bit dodgy about them, or they're just after money.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I know we need to have our ways paid, you know, that's why I just write my books, but I don't charge for my when I put esoteric wisdom up or anything, because it's not mine to charge for. But I would hope that it's helping people find their conscience and develop their soul. And this is the same with Hermes Risen. You know, it'd be lovely if someone could sponsor us to bring this out as a wonderful magazine that we could sell everywhere. But we're quite happy with the online presence. We get quite a lot of readers that come. You know, we're also always looking for new writers that are willing to pass on their esoteric knowledge and wisdom. You know, just get in touch with me. Happy to look at your work. We don't do that much poetry, but we do more of deciphering poetry. So I'm not really, we want articles really, or book reviews, or if anybody's a writer and wants their book reviewed, we'll happily send us a copy. And we've got various book reviewers amongst us all that we never say anything negative. We've always got a positive outlook, because that's what we're trying to pass on to people. Keep uplifted, be a sun,
Exactly.
and at the same time be awake. It is difficult. Yes,
it is difficult. We were talking about this last week, actually, about, you know, it'd be nice on the news if they actually had positive stories they were beaming out all the time, but they're always so negative all the time. I don't watch the news anymore because most of it is, in my opinion anyway, is propaganda. It's not really truth. And it's designed to keep your vibrations, your energy low. And so it's very important for people to laugh and find positive things to look at and enjoy. You know, go in nature and enjoy the sunshine and the birds singing, smell the flowers. You know, it brings you joy. Do what brings you joy in life.
I do try and tell people that.
Sorry, Debbie, I was just going to say, it's like the TV. That's why they're called programs. You are being programmed.
Yes. And they used to have a little sneaky trick on the news, didn't they? They always ended with a nice little story, because they want you to come back the next day. So you're going way uplifted. You know, nice
oh my God.
Tell them about the bombings and the shootings and everything, and then we'll have a rabbit story right at the end.
Yeah, it's a cute rabbit story at the end.
Yeah. And then people despair at the state of the world instead of seeing what beauty is out there or what good people are out there. These people that are watching this don't realize there's lots of groups doing fantastic work out there. The news should be about, well, you know, this group helped save the trees, or I don't know, I'm just kicking ideas out of the air, or you know, these people started a lovely bee colony that we, you know, had been missing for years.
Which is wonderful, isn't it? I mean, I luckily, I mean, I see some of these groups on Facebook, and I mean, I'm a member of. I don't necessarily get involved in the discussions, but I observe. I'm a good observer in life. Good observer. And but you know, they're really positive. There's some lovely things going on. There's things to do with ley lines and you know, sort of stone monuments, megaliths, that kind of thing. And people in the main are actually really helpful. So if someone comes on and says, "Oh, well, I'm new to this. I'm new to ley lines. What are they?" You know, some really lovely people will come on and share their knowledge with them, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there is like an alternative tribe out there, isn't there? That, you know, we are helping each other and keeping ourselves together. Because I look at a lot of them, and I love going looking at megaliths. You know, I do my trips, you know, as much as I can, and go and see standing stones or circles, or you know, what sacred fields that we know used to have temples on. That's part of the reason I went to Cornwall for solstice. I really wanted to go to Michael's Mount, because that's where the Mary and Michael line come through on the top. And I went 2 days in a row. It was so fantastic. Could really feel the energies.
Have you been to St Margaret's Church at Hopton-on-Sea in Norfolk? Because that's supposed to be where it kind of finishes, isn't it?
No, I keep meaning to try and get to Norfolk. I still haven't quite got that way. My travels when I was younger were all abroad, and it was only in the last few years that I started really looking around this country. I've been to stone circles all around the world. I've done Avebury and Stonehenge.
Norfolk is fabulous. In Norfolk, it's where Arthur D is buried here. John Dee's son. Yeah. And there's a lot of links to alchemy and that up this way. It's a fabulous. It's got so many historical things in it. Loads of churches and everything. So I've got a little book about the churches in Norfolk, because I keep saying I'm going to do the trip and go to all the little churches.
We've got a really interesting one not that far from us actually, and it's a little place called Little Witchingham. And this church, believe it or not, was actually scheduled, I believe, to be demolished, which is terrible. And it actually has some of the best preserved medieval paintings in the church. It's amazing.
I must come to that.
Yeah, you must. And it's literally in the middle of nowhere. There's just one house opposite, and it's up a really quiet lane. So unless you know where it is, and you're definitely going to go there, you would never pass it.
Well,
so
if you come to Norfolk, we'll take you there. Yeah,
definitely.
I'm coming. I'm going to come up there. So it's been saved, that church, then, has it?
It has. It has. It's under the Historic Churches Trust, I believe. So they've preserved it. But luckily, it's remained open, and you can just go. You don't have to make an appointment. You can just go and look at it. But it's amazing. It's a beautiful little church. Yeah. Really lovely.
I'm going to be holding you to that. I'm coming to Norfolk.
Please do. Yes, no problem at all. That's what this show is all about, is listening to people, talking and that, and we don't judge people. We have our own opinion on things, but we don't enforce that on anybody, and we let people say what they want to talk about. Some things we won't believe in what they're talking about, but nevertheless, you've got to let them have their say, ain't you? Because there's people out there who want to learn, and of course, and if someone that someone's come on your show and they're wrong, that they're wrong, then other people can go and search and then find it for themselves, can't they?
That's right. Yeah, we must make sure freedom of speech is not taken from us.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I do think that a lot of this, political correctness is to do with squashing people's freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And to again keep everybody boxed in and hating each other. It's a real turning people against each other, isn't it?
Exactly.
When we should all be accepting that we're all human. Well, maybe there are a few non-humans around. I do wonder about that sometimes. But the one love to everything. I'm sure there's a few aliens walking about amongst us, and I'm sure there's some demonic entities dressed up as humans walking about amongst us.
Yeah,
but I don't encounter them that often.
But I agree. It's all about accepting somebody has an alternative opinion to you. You don't have to agree with it, but equally you don't have to squash their opinion because it doesn't, correlate with your opinion. Live and let live.
Oh, sorry.
No, go. I was just saying, live and let live.
That's it. Yes, I don't like being preached at myself, and I hope I don't preach at people. But I like to have a good conversation with people. I love discussing different views. I was doing that just the other day with a friend about that, and he was coming from one angle, I was coming from another, but it was a really good, friendly debate between the two of us.
And what it does as well, it provokes people to think, because if you're listening to an alternative perspective about something that you have kind of your own preconceived ideas about, it then makes you think, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about that. That's quite interesting. And then you kind of go off then on your own path of discovery.
Well, that's the thing, Debbie. What I've found along my journey is that you can show people facts and they still won't believe it, because if they've been, say, researching something for 50 years and then you suddenly come along and prove that that's not quite right, they still won't change their mind, but they're living a lie. And I think that's so sad that you can, if someone come along and showed me after 50 years and said, Gary, you know what, all that you told people that was wrong, then I'd say, if you proved it to me, I'd say, well, that's great. You know, thank you for showing me. Thank you for showing me that. But there are people that I've met, you know, book writers and everything, and they've been studying a certain path for a long time, and then you show them it's wrong, you know, and they still won't accept it, and they still go peddling and selling their books. But the sad thing about that is them books are sold to people on a misrepresentation, you know, and they really know the truth. I think that's so sad.
It is, yeah. It's like I've changed my mind on so many things over the years because I can, and people should be able to. But there's something about some people, they don't want to change their mind because I think they're worried it's going to make them look silly, and it doesn't. I think it's quite a mature thing to do, to be able to take other ideas and views or realise that you're wrong. None of us are right about anything 100%, are we? And so I quite admire people that change their views.
What's that?
I think Gary's going to say something. Apart from his wife, yeah.
Oh yeah, she's right all the time. But
well, of course she is.
He doesn't need Google when he's got me.
No, this is AI there. AI. Oh my God.
Oh dear.
But we need to be able to have a good laugh, and at the same time know that we don't know everything. We're willing to learn from other people. You know, we want to believe in things, and if we're shown that it was slightly wrong or another way of looking at it, it's nothing wrong with that. It's fine to do that.
Absolutely.
It just proves you're a grown-up, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. That is the art of debate, isn't it? Being able to rationalize and reason, and to be able to look at someone's point of view, and to, you know, that I love debate. I really do. I think it's fabulous, you know, and especially if you're with someone who has a good conversation, and, you know, like you, Debbie, you've got a great conversation, and we've thoroughly enjoyed your time on it, and I'm sure the listeners have as well, and those watching. Yeah,
definitely. But wasn't it wonderful that you were able to go over to Egypt? Because to me, I think Egypt really is the cradle of pretty much most of the, you know, religions and the esoteric understandings and Freemasonry and everything. So, you know, it's a magical place. And I remember I visited before I met Gary, going back years and years ago now. I think it's possibly changed a little bit now. But I remember being absolutely overawed when I went to visit the sites. I just couldn't believe it, because I was very attracted, even as a very small child. I'd get in bed with my parents in the morning, and my dad would pop down and make a cup of tea. And my parents had this kind of inbuilt headboard that was also a library, which was quite unusual. But I was very drawn always to the Egyptian book. It was the Treasures of Tutankhamun. And I would always get this out. I'd have been about 4 years old, and I was flicking through, and I loved it. And I loved everything Egyptian ever since I was a child. And I've had a few experiences, you know, revolving around that. But I remember when I had to leave Egypt, I cried. And that might sound a bit odd, but I cried because it really affected me so much, deeply.
Same here. Yeah, I was bawling my eyes out on that plane home. Oh, back to England. I should be in my magical land, and I keep saying I'm going to go back there, and I went in 97 and I still haven't gone back there. But I've had a lot of Egyptian experiences since, but just not in Egypt. But he's calling. I have a strong feeling, especially in the last 100 years, Egypt's calling us, isn't it? It's like the old gods are coming back.
Definitely. I feel a very strong pull to Egypt myself. So if you go, let me know.
Yeah, we'll go together. You should do an Alan's Investigates tour out there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Have you ever come across, Debbie, a book called The Gate of Remembrance?
Is that a Gnostic text?
No, it was Edgar Blythe Bond. I don't know if you remember him, but he basically, they were doing some automatic writing, and it was through this automatic writing that they discovered the Edgar Chapel at Glastonbury.
Yes. Okay.
It's an amazing story.
I didn't remember the name.
Sorry, Debbie. That was bought out by Michael Bentine. You remember Michael Bentine? Fabulous Michael Bentine. And sorry.
I used to have his books. I loved his work. And I remember he did Potty Time when I was a child, which was one of my favourite books. But I know someone who used to know Blythe Bond, And he used to tell us, he's gone now, been gone a long time. And I wish that I'd recorded all the things he'd said.
Wow.
I don't remember it properly now.
Wow. But
That's
I mean,
interesting,
it's
isn't
a
it?
fascinating story. And I think that, in sort of some other ways as well, people are being led to finding objects in this similar kind of way, whether it's by a feeling or, spiritual intervention that this is happening. So it's really interesting.
Well, we've had some great guests on here, like Andrew Garfer, Graham Phillips, some great guests and they've actually came across things, discoveries through intuition and that, and it's fabulous. And the more you learn about individuals and see it, you see how many people are actually on the right path, don't you?
Doing their psychic questing. Yeah, I've heard Graham Phillips speak lots, and Andrew Goffey's at the Nephilim Anthropology conference that I go to, and we often talk about, well, it's kind of like, because I have that pull to go to places, but then it's finding the finances to do it. Like, I know I have to go to Norfolk, I have to go to them churches.
Exactly.
I had to go to Egypt, and if I hadn't have gone to Egypt, because Egypt was one of the most pivotal times in my life, it changed so much for me. But with Graham Phillips finding that sword that he had, it's just, was it the green sword? I can't remember the story properly. He did it all with Andrew Collins, didn't he?
Yeah, it's a great
They're some of my
story.
favourite psychic questing books.
Yeah, I think it was the green stone, wasn't it, or something? And there was also a sword as well, which I think was in Mary Queen of Scots or something, I think. So yeah, I mean, it still continues as well, because they're still discovering things. So I mean, it's quite amazing, isn't it?
It is, and I think that there's a call. It's all calling out to us, isn't it? I find in Glastonbury, when I go to Glastonbury, I feel the goddess or whatever it is that's there wants me to stay and do work. But then, I don't have the money to live in Glastonbury, so I have to come back to London. But then maybe I'm helping other people find things. I get the call to go to certain stone circles or whatever. Don't necessarily know if I'll find something physical, but I definitely find something spiritual for myself. But there's the quest on both, the psychic quest for insight and all the ancient history coming out. All these great researchers like Graham Phillips are showing us that history is not what the academics tell us it is.
No, definitely not.
Exactly. And it has been a case, I'm afraid, of history is written by the victors, isn't it? So, we've lost to a great degree our roots, our heritage, our true heritage. And I think it's very interesting getting back to William Blake, because that, to me, is what the song Jerusalem is all about. It's about bringing in and ushering in a new sort of a time of universal peace, basically.
We were so lucky that, is it William Parry that put it to a tune? But, if he hadn't have done that, Jerusalem would never have been as famous as it is. And we were so lucky to be able to sing it when we were children at school. I know
it should be the national anthem, if you ask me.
The national anthem.
Not that old dirge we've got. Oh, dirge, God save the Queen. None of that. God save the King.
Yeah.
Oh, West Place of Jerusalem,
Because I often wonder, because Blake used to sing all his poems and his books, and I wonder if someone remembered how he sang it. And I'd like to think that was how he sang it originally. Obviously not with all the music, the orchestra we had today, and maybe that's how that whoever the musician was that put it to music, maybe he heard somebody else singing it. I don't know, or maybe Blake influenced him and came down through the spirit world and went, I want this song like this, because it is powerful.
It is. It's a beautiful song. We had it played at our wedding, but unfortunately the lady, bless her, that was playing the organ was sort of playing it with boxing gloves on, which wasn't so good.
No.
Oops. I actually went to Worthing last year and went down to Bognor Regis to go and see William Blake's cottage, because he moved away from London only for a few years, but the cottage is still there. It's owned by the Blake Society at the moment, but it was so wonderful to go and walk and look around the place that he used to
we'll
live
have to go there. That's wonderful, isn't it?
That would be wonderful. No, it's so fascinating, but we've been blessed with so many lights, I would like to call them, that have brought brought this spiritual enlightenment to people, and not necessarily overtly, but sometimes, within the works as well. I mean, I think when you look at Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, and C.S. Lewis and things, there's things, if you look deeply into those stories and you understand, there are messages within those books for people.
I wonder if Tolkien was tuning into the ancient world, the world when dwarves and elves and such like all walk together on the same planet, because I like to believe that's what used to happen in the past. It wasn't just us humans. And C.S. Lewis, he was working with him. They part of the Inklings, weren't they? And the Narnia books had such an impact on me as a child.
Me too. They're wonderful. So, Debbie, where can people actually get hold of your books to have a look?
My books, you can find me on debbie-elliott.co.uk. I have a website, and I've got some of my books here. I've got my Tesla and Twain, all about Nikola Tesla and Mark Twain. They were friends. They're all fiction books, but they've all been researched. So, like, for example, I have another one here called
Debbie.
Oh,
Debbie, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to finish now, but thank you so much for joining us on the Allens Investigate. You can check us out at theallensinvestigate.com. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans and on Roku. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie. Fantastic guest.
for having me.
Fantastic guest.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
Bye. I really enjoyed it.
Hey there. It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. The News on the Flip Side, in the category of politics and news. News on the Flip Side is a much different news and political program which is not deemed as opinion news. Listen as Joe Montaldo brings to you just the facts from trusted sources which will allow you, the people, to make up your own minds on the various stories being reported on. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate News on the Flip Side in the category of politics and news. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and do it now.
It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast, in 3 categories: education, storyteller drama, and art. For 4 years, the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast has provided advice and tips from international best-selling authors, world-class artists, contest judges and winners, and industry professionals based on the world-famous Writers of the Future contest created in 1983 by L. Ron Hubbard to help the aspiring writer and artist no matter their age. It is dedicated to the future of storytelling and art by showing that it is never too late to start, and those who make it are those who never give up. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast in any or all of the 3 categories: education, storyteller drama, and art. That's podcastawards.com, and please take a moment and go out and vote now.
Looking for something new in sci-fi or fantasy? Check out what Brandon Sanderson, Orson Scott Card, Nnedi Okorafor, and others chose as the best news stories of the year in the L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future Anthology. From 24 award-winning authors and illustrators, plus art and writing tips and bonus stories. L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future. Buy your copy at galaxypress.com, Amazon, or wherever books are sold.
You are listening to UPRN, United Public Radio Network, coming to you live on 105.3 right up to 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. UPRN.